The moment Damon shouted at the dinner table, "Your mom isn't part of this family," never was, everything inside me shattered. The room froze, forks paused midair, conversation stilled, and my 7-year-old daughter's eyes welled with tears. I could feel the weight of every stare, some uncomfortable, others masked with polite laughter, as if to dismiss his cruelty. I wanted to curl up, to disappear into the floorboards, but I forced myself to kneel beside my kids to whisper, "You belong here. I am your family." My voice cracked, but I held it steady, even as my heart twisted painfully. I left the room quietly, avoiding Damon's victorious smirk. In that moment, I told myself, he must be stressed. It's just a bad moment. Still, a seed of doubt took root. Maybe this was more than just a family spat. But I wasn't ready to fight yet. I needed more time, more certainty. I'm Sadie Burton, 42 years old, a middle school counselor who spent the last 15 years helping kids find their way in a world that often feels too harsh. Some days, my job means being the steady hand for the kids in my office. Other days, it's being the anchor in my own chaotic family. I'm the silent provider, handling school runs, managing bills, smoothing over conflicts no one else wants to touch. Just last month, I quietly paid nearly $5,000 for Daniel's orthodontic work from my savings, without telling Damon or anyone else. It wasn't about recognition. I just wanted Daniel to have a chance at a confident smile, but Damon barely acknowledges me. When we're at family events, he sidelines me, making cutting comments under his breath. The tension between us festers beneath the surface smiles, like a storm waiting to break. Still, I hold on to hope, imagining that love and effort will one day be enough to fit me into this family. Looking back, some memories sting sharper than others. I remember sitting at the dinner table when I was 12, watching Damon's mother, Evelyn, lavish praise on him as the pride of the family. Damon was the golden boy, never asked to do chores, always excused from rules, and smothered with attention. Meanwhile, I was expected to silently shoulder my responsibilities and excel without complaint. One night, Damon brazenly took credit for a school project I had poured hours into. Our parents never corrected him, their silence carving a hollow ache inside me. I told myself it was just how things are, chalking it up to tradition and tough love. But beneath that rationalization, I learned early on that my worth wasn't about who I was. It was measured against Damon's place in the family hierarchy. Evelyn's passive approval of this favoritism made it clear I was always on the outside looking in. The sacrifices I've made are tangible and constant, though they go unnoticed. For years, I've been covering $2,000 a month on the mortgage, quietly paying for all the kids' school fees and extracurriculars, over $10,000 in total. There were 2 vacations I canceled to afford Daniel's dental work, and I even took a pay cut 2 years ago so I could work closer to home and manage the family logistics better. Matthew, my husband, quietly asks me sometimes, "Are they even aware of how much you do?" I tell him it's not about recognition. It's about love and keeping the family together. But to them, it feels like an obligation. Damon dismisses my efforts as over-involvement, mocking me in casual remarks, eroding everything I try to build. Meanwhile, I hold the deed to the family home. Legally, it's mine, inherited from my late father. Yet, everyone treats it like communal property, as if my ownership is invisible, just another thing to overlook. Lisa, my sister, knows the truth, but we rarely speak of it. The house is my secret power, quiet and waiting, while I keep holding the pieces together the only way I know how. The moment I sensed Damon stepping up his game was when the whispers started. At first, they were faint, little murmurings from cousins I barely spoke to, a sidelong glance from Aunt Marge when I arrived at a family barbecue. I overheard phrases like, "Sadie's too sensitive," and "she always stirs up drama." It cut deeper than I expected. Damon didn't have to yell or confront me directly. He knew how to wield poison quietly, spreading seeds of doubt among relatives, turning them into unwitting pawns. One afternoon, at a casual coffee meetup, Cousin Jenna pressed me to just keep the peace, her voice dripping with false concern. "You don't want to make things worse, Sadie. Sometimes it's better to let things go." I wanted to scream that letting things go had already cost me years of respect, but I kept my mouth shut. The worst was when rumors began swirling that I was manipulating Matthew, using the family for financial gain. These lies felt like icy daggers because, in truth, I was the one footing most of the bills. My silence was weaponized into evidence against me. At home, Evelyn's dismissals were the hardest to swallow. "You've always been too emotional," she said once, with that cold, knowing look that made me question everything I'd felt. I retreated into myself, wondering if I was really the problem. Was I overreacting? Maybe I was imagining the hostility, the subtle exclusions. The family's loyalty seemed to coil tighter around Damon's narrative, leaving me isolated. Even Lisa seemed hesitant, caught between her role as my sister and the complicated web Damon wove. I felt small, unseen, and dangerously alone in the very family I'd tried so hard to protect. Despite the gnawing uncertainty, I refused to let this shadow win. I clung to my truth, even as it felt like I was fighting invisible enemies in the dark. Every smile I forced, every conversation I avoided, was a battle against the doubt Damon seeded. The family was fracturing, but I wasn't ready to lose my place, not without trying to speak up. I thought a family meeting might calm the storm, a chance to air the truth openly. So I reached out to Evelyn and Damon, requesting a sit-down with Lisa as mediator. In the sterile silence of our living room, I laid it all out. Facts, feelings, hopes, my voice quivering but clear. "I've been trying to hold this family together, but I can't do it alone. We need to face what's happening honestly." For a moment, I saw a flicker of understanding in Lisa's eyes, but Damon reacted with a flood of tears and accusations, turning the table like a seasoned actor. "You're trying to divide us," he sobbed theatrically. "You don't see the real problems here. You just want attention." Evelyn nodded stiffly, urging me to accept things as they are, her words like a cold slap. I felt the warmth drain from the room, the support I'd hoped for evaporating. Lisa's attempts to mediate felt feeble, caught between sisterly loyalty and a desire to keep peace. I left the meeting hollow, my chest heavy with exhaustion and frustration. Logic and goodwill had failed me. The family had chosen a narrative that excluded me. Yet, buried beneath the pain, a spark of hope lingered, a fragile belief that someday, understanding might still break through. Weeks later, at the school's annual fundraiser, a night meant for celebration, I found myself blindsided and publicly humiliated. Damon seized the microphone, his voice dripping with false concern as he accused me of using family money to buy favor. His words cut through the chatter like a knife. He revealed private financial details, claiming I manipulated Matthew and hid debts. The room fell silent. I felt every eye turn to me. Colleagues, my husband, children, family. Shock and confusion rippling through the crowd. Matthew's quiet defense was a balm, but I could see the strain in his eyes. The humiliation wasn't just personal. It threatened my professional reputation, the very foundation I'd built for years. My heart pounded painfully in my chest as I struggled to keep my composure. Damon's attack was no accident. It was a calculated strike, weaponizing my private life to isolate me further. The sting of betrayal scorched deep, but beneath the flames, a cold clarity took hold. This was war, and Damon had just upped the stakes. Despite the devastation, I mustered the courage to reach out one last time. I called Damon, proposing a truce, a real chance to heal old wounds. I spoke slowly, deliberately, my voice steady even as my heart trembled. "I'm not asking for favors. I just want to be treated with dignity. We all deserve that." The silence on the other end was suffocating. Then came his cold, mocking laughter, cutting sharper than any insult. He dismissed my plea, ridiculing my vulnerability, refusing any peace offering. And then, the final blow. He threatened legal action over the house, suggesting I didn't belong there. The words echoed in my mind long after the call ended. I was utterly rejected, cast out by a man who knew exactly how to break me. But beneath the shattering pain, a quiet resolve took root. I had done all I could. The fault was his, not mine. This family might have turned its back, but I wasn't finished fighting for my place. for my truth. The isolation crept in quietly at first, but soon it became suffocating, like a weight pressing down on my chest that no breath could relieve. Damon's whispers had multiplied, seeping into the ears of relatives I barely saw, twisting the story until I was the villain in my own home. They said I played the victim, that I couldn't take responsibility, and worse, those words echoed in empty rooms long after the conversations ended. At family gatherings, their glances flicked past me like I was a shadow, invisible and unwelcome. I caught Lisa's hesitant eyes once, filled with pity, but even she didn't know how to bridge the growing gulf. Matthew was the only constant, his quiet presence my lifeline in a sea of doubt. Still, as I lay awake at night, the question gnawed relentlessly. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I had twisted reality with my emotions. Maybe I had misread the signs or overstepped, blinded by my own hope. I felt utterly exposed, my openness weaponized against me, used to paint a portrait of weakness and manipulation. Damon's venom spread through the family like a slow poison, and I was left to absorb the fallout in silence. The exhaustion was bone deep, as if my heart had been drained dry. My voice, once steady and full of conviction, now trembled with uncertainty whenever I tried to defend myself. I wanted to scream, to demand justice, but the fear of fracturing what little remained of the family tether held me back. I caught myself rehearsing every conversation, every smile, wondering if I had been too eager, too vulnerable, naive to expect warmth where there was only cold strategy. The crushing weight of loneliness settled around me, dark and relentless, threatening to swallow every last shred of hope. But beneath the heavy fog of despair, something stubborn flickered, a seed of defiance. If I was to be painted as the problem, then I needed to understand what I was fighting against. I began to steel myself, quietly gathering strength in the solitude. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It was a battle for my dignity, my place, my truth. I started to prepare, not for reconciliation, but for resistance. The old Sadie who believed in love and sacrifice was beginning to fade, replaced by someone more guarded, more strategic, someone who wouldn't be so easily erased. My hands trembled as I clutched the papers to the house, my quiet power, my last line of defense. Despite the crushing weight of the pain, a new resolve simmered beneath the surface, fierce and unyielding. I would survive this. I had to. The grim reality hit me hardest at the Christmas gathering. The night that was supposed to bring warmth and forgiveness turned into my undoing. Damon, with that smug, rehearsed smile, stood before the family and made his announcement like a judge delivering a verdict. I was disinherited. My name was wiped clean from the family trust, erased as thoroughly as if I'd never belonged. Then, as if to seal my exile, he declared my removal from the family home documents, without a word to me, without consent. The words hung in the air like a guillotine's blade, sharp and irreversible. Lisa's face paled. Matthew's jaw clenched so tightly I worried it might crack. The relatives exchanged shocked looks, their eyes flitting between me and Damon, as if the truth were suddenly rewritten in front of them. I sat frozen, my breath caught in my throat, the cold clarity settling over me like a harsh winter dawn. Love, sacrifice, hope, all meaningless to Damon. In that moment, the veil lifted. I saw the family not as a sanctuary, but a battlefield where I had been nothing more than a pawn waiting to be sacrificed. The silence I held was not weakness. It was the moment the storm inside me quieted, not with relief, but with the cold sharpness of awareness. I didn't cry. I didn't lash out. I simply listened as Damon played his part perfectly, the orchestrator of my exile. The house that had sheltered my children, the legacy my father left me, was now just a line on a document, a line Damon thought he could erase. I felt the weight of that truth pressing down, and for the first time, the hope I'd clung to shattered completely. There was no turning back from this. The family I thought I had was gone, replaced by a cruel game of power and exclusion. But beneath the ruin of my heart, a new identity was born. No longer the invisible victim, I was becoming someone else, strategic, guarded, and fiercely determined. The love I had given unconditionally was now weaponized into a resolve cold as ice. Damon had made his move, and I was ready to face the fallout with eyes wide open. Alone in the quiet sanctuary of my bedroom, the memories surged in, relentless waves crashing against the fragile shore of my composure. I saw every unpaid bill I had covered, every silent insult I had swallowed, every attempt to believe in a family that had never truly accepted me. The pain was raw, but it no longer consumed me. It fueled a fire that burned away the last remnants of denial. I remembered the nights I stayed up, worried over the family's future, the sacrifices I made without a single thank you, the years of Damon's cold dismissals, the way he framed me as the problem while cloaked in victimhood himself. The truth was undeniable. Damon had always controlled this game. I had simply refused to admit it, blinded by the desperate hope that blood meant something. Now, that hope was ashes, and anger surged from the depths of my grief. But this anger was not reckless. It was precise and clear. I acknowledged the power I held, not just emotionally, but legally. The house was in my name, a symbol of my father's trust and my rightful place. I no longer wanted to be invisible or powerless. The grief transformed into a cold, calculated determination. I whispered to myself, never again. Never again would I be the family's secret, the one who sacrificed everything and got nothing in return. The time for silent suffering was over. I was no longer the woman who needed to be saved or forgiven. I was a force to be reckoned with. The wounds might still ache, but they had given birth to a new strength, one forged in the crucible of betrayal and clarity. I was ready to reclaim what was mine. When I finally confided in Matthew, the weight on my chest felt lighter just from speaking it aloud. "It's time to stop hoping," I told him, my voice steady but fierce. "I'm done waiting for them to see me or treat me fairly. I'm going to protect what's mine and expose what's been hidden in the shadows." Matthew's eyes searched mine, cautious but unwavering. He reminded me gently, "This fight won't be easy, Sadie. It's going to be painful, but you're not alone." His quiet support was the anchor I needed as I began to shift from emotional survival to strategic action. Together, we started mapping out the steps to challenge Damon, using the house deed, financial records, anything to prove the truth. We talked late into the night, carefully planning our moves, knowing the road ahead would be rough and filled with resistance. Damon was the primary target, but the tangled web included others whose loyalty needed to be confronted. I felt a fierce clarity rising, a sense of control I hadn't felt in years. The emotional storm was settling, replaced by a sharp, tactical mindset. I began gathering documents, organizing files, preparing to fight not just for myself, but for the future I deserved. The battlefield was set, and I was no longer just a player. I was a commander ready to reclaim my family's narrative. The quiet strength in Matthew's presence reminded me I wasn't as alone as I had feared. Together, we would face whatever came next head-on. I sat at the kitchen table, piles of papers spread before me like a battlefield map. The weight of every document, the mortgage statements, utility bills, school fees, pressed down on my chest. I needed to understand exactly how tangled Damon's and Daniel's lives were with mine. Taking a deep breath, I began mapping out who depended on what. Damon, I realized with a cold clarity, leaned heavily on my mortgage payments to keep the family home afloat. Without me, the house would crumble beneath him. Daniel, arrogant and entitled, was tethered to me through school support and the social veneer I maintained for him among the parents and teachers. Evelyn, distant as ever, remained financially passive but was socially aligned with Damon, her loyalty another thread in the web. I knew strength came from knowledge, so I reached out to my lawyer, Mara, a steady presence who had been by my side quietly through the chaos. Over coffee, I laid out everything I had collected. Mara's expression sharpened as she sifted through bank statements and contracts, her fingers pausing on a series of transactions. "Sadie, these are serious," she murmured. "Look here. Hidden debts. Funds siphoned off without approval. Damon's been playing a dangerous game." My heart clenched at the thought of Damon's betrayal running deeper than I imagined. Text messages revealed manipulations, false promises to family members, and efforts to isolate me financially and emotionally. I was no longer the powerless one. I was the linchpin holding their house of cards together. For the first time in months, a fierce sense of leverage surged inside me, igniting a resolve I hadn't dared to feel before. They needed me far more than I needed them. The cold night air seeped through the open window as I sat cross-legged on the living room floor, documents arrayed like a second skin. Every piece of paper was a stitch in the fabric of my strategy, a weapon forged from betrayal and necessity. I repeated to myself quietly, I am not invisible. I am not expendable. The familiar hum of the city outside was a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside my mind. I spent hours double-checking details, annotating margins with sharp notes and reminders. I was no longer reacting. I was planning. The family's dependence on me was their weakness, and I was determined to exploit it with precision. The quiet determination in my chest was a steady drumbeat, a promise that I would fight with every ounce of strength left in me. Over the next few days, I documented everything meticulously: bank statements, text threads, contracts, and even the small notes Damon had carelessly left in emails. Each revelation etched itself into my memory, proof not just of his cruelty, but of his recklessness. As I compiled the evidence, the weight inside shifted from despair to something colder, sharper, a calculated power. They think they can erase me, I whispered to the dark room, voice steady. They've got another thing coming. The house, the financial lifelines, the social supports. They were all mine to protect, and I would not let them slip away without a fight. Weeks passed in a blur of quiet but deliberate preparation. I updated legal documents, changing passwords and securing digital access to accounts Damon might have tried to manipulate. Each click and keystroke was a silent act of rebellion, a step toward reclaiming control. Every evening I sat with Mara on video calls, reviewing contingencies and potential legal strategies. Maintain the facade, Mara advised. Keep your cool. They'll never suspect the storm gathering beneath your calm. So I did. At family dinners and school events, I smiled and played the part of the devoted mother, the composed counselor. My tone was measured, my presence calm, an unshakable island amid turbulent seas. It was exhausting, carrying the tension beneath the surface. I felt like a tightly wound spring, every interaction a test of endurance. Damon and the others noticed nothing but my usual warmth, my steady care. Yet inside, I was a volcano simmering, ready to erupt when the time was right. At night, when the house whispered with silence, I felt the weight of waiting. This calm before the storm was suffocating but necessary. I told myself it was patience, a strategic pause, not weakness. The facade I wore was a mask, but behind it, the fire of my resolve blazed brighter with each passing day. One rainy afternoon, as I combed through old emails for any overlooked detail, I stumbled upon a thread that made my breath catch. Hidden beneath layers of mundane conversation was a secret correspondence between Damon and Lisa, my sister. Shock rippled through me like icy water. They were colluding, exchanging information about me, plotting behind my back. Lisa had been feeding Damon everything. My vulnerabilities, my doubts, even details I'd shared in confidence. In return, Damon promised her financial favors and influence within the family, securing her place by his side. The betrayal was a knife twisting in my heart. Lisa, whom I had trusted implicitly, was not the ally I believed her to be. The depth of their conspiracy was staggering. I reread the emails, feeling the sting of each calculated word. "She's weaker than we thought," Lisa had typed. Damon's replies were cold, methodical, evidence of a plan designed to isolate and erase me. The realization crushed me, but beneath the ache was a surge of clarity. This wasn't just a battle with Damon anymore. It was a war with two fronts. The family I thought I could rely on had fractured in ways I hadn't imagined. Yet, paradoxically, the betrayal gave me fresh ammunition and a stronger moral clarity. If they could betray me so deeply, I could no longer hesitate. The fight was bigger, but so was my resolve. The next morning, I moved with quiet determination. Matthew watched as I began withdrawing financial support, a decision I'd agonized over but knew was necessary. I stopped covering the mortgage payments and school fees that Damon and Daniel relied on so heavily. I sent formal legal notices challenging the unauthorized changes Damon had made to the property documents, carefully worded to establish my position without revealing my full hand. The first signs of pressure rippled through the family almost immediately. Damon's calls became terse, Lisa's smiles strained, and rumors began to swirl like autumn leaves caught in the wind. Through it all, I remained outwardly composed. At family gatherings, I smiled with the practiced ease of someone who had weathered storms before. Matthew's quiet support was my anchor, his presence a balm against the rising tension. The cracks in Damon and Lisa's facade were subtle but unmistakable. Hesitant glances, clipped conversations, a sudden chill where warmth used to be. I felt the power shift, slow but certain, and with it, a fierce satisfaction. The first moves of my plan had landed, and the family's illusion of control was beginning to unravel. The battle lines were drawn, and I was no longer on the defensive. I was the one making them tremble. The air in the grand hall thickened the moment I stepped forward, clutching the folder that held everything: the deed, the financial records, the messages that unraveled years of deceit like a tightly wound spool. Faces turned in unison. A hush fell heavier than the polished chandeliers overhead. Damon's eyes widened, his usual smug calm faltering, while Lisa's complexion drained like paint peeling from a wall. My voice, steady and clear, cut through the silence. This family belongs to those who honor truth and respect, not those who manipulate and betray. The words echoed, not as an accusation, but as a declaration of who I was now, someone unwilling to be erased. I laid the papers on the polished oak table, tapping the house deed with a firm finger. This home, this legacy, has always been mine, I said, eyes locking on Damon's, who now looked like a man caught in a trap he could not escape. These financial records show the unpaid debts and the secret siphoning of funds, proof of the collusion between Damon and Lisa to rewrite history and rewrite ownership. Murmurs started among the gathering. Relatives, neighbors, old family friends, faces etched with shock or newfound understanding. Some nodded slowly, their silence a tacit endorsement. I felt their shift like a tide changing beneath my feet. The weight of years of silence, of injustice, felt suddenly lifted. I have waited too long to be invisible, I continued, voice gaining strength. Those attacks, the lies, they will not be tolerated any longer. I've spoken to my lawyer. The consequences of continued manipulation will be legal and public. The room was still, the gravity of my words settling like dust in the air. Damon's mouth opened, then closed, unable to find footing. Lisa's trembling hands betrayed her shock. For the first time, I was not the one shrinking back into shadows. I stood tall, seen, and recognized. The power dynamic had shifted, irrevocably. I caught Matthew's eye across the room. His quiet nod was the last piece I needed to feel grounded. This moment was not just a victory, it was a reclamation. The family who had silenced me was now forced to confront the truth in full light. I was no longer the one to be dismissed or erased. I was the one holding the truth, and with it, the authority to protect what was rightfully mine. The room remained heavy with disbelief, but beneath it all, a new respect blossomed, fragile, yet undeniable. I felt a fierce, controlled satisfaction blooming in my chest. This was my home, my fight, and I would no longer cower. The days that followed were a storm of crumbling facades. Damon's carefully constructed world began to shatter like brittle glass. Bank notices flooded through the mail. Unpaid debts he had hidden now exposed and unignorable. Lisa's reputation, once buoyed by false alliances, took a nosedive as whispered doubts spread among relatives and old friends. The calls started almost immediately, Damon's voice desperate, Lisa's tones pleading, their messages a barrage of apologies, promises, and frantic attempts at repair. Each ring felt like a test of my resolve, but I refused to yield. I answered only when necessary, my words clipped and firm. I'm not interested in old lies or empty apologies. Respect the boundaries I've set. I ended calls with practiced calm, sensing their desperation wane with every rejection. Meanwhile, Conversations with family members hesitated no longer. Eyes that once looked away now met mine, questioning Damon's narrative, reconsidering their loyalties. I sensed a subtle realignment, like iron filings shifting toward a magnet. The satisfaction was quiet, controlled. No gloating, just the steadiness of justice unfolding. Still, I kept my guard. The satisfaction was tempered by the knowledge that this was only the beginning. My focus sharpened on maintaining the boundaries that protected my family and me. I refused to be drawn back into the toxic whirlpool Damon and Lisa tried to drag me into. Each refusal was a declaration of strength, each boundary a fortress. I watched as their influence eroded piece by piece, holding fast to the calm certainty that this time I would not be broken. The power balance had changed, and I was determined to keep it that way. Desperation twisted Damon's actions into something more volatile. His threats of legal action arrived by cold letters, and his public persona shifted into that of a victim, spinning tales designed to pit others against me. He enlisted a few remaining loyalists to spearhead social attacks, hoping to isolate me further with whispered lies and staged emotional blackmail. Lisa's attempts at public reconciliation became more theatrical, her apologies broadcast in awkward family gatherings and muted social events. But I was ready. Calm, collected, shielded by the truth I held, I refused to be swayed. When Damon sent a particularly venomous message, threatening to drag me through courts and ruin, I simply replied with facts, refusing to engage in the emotional warfare he craved. "Your threats won't silence me," I wrote. "The truth stands, and so do I." The attacks lost their sting as I deflected them with quiet dignity. Meanwhile, cracks appeared in my own ranks. Some family members reached out, their voices tinged with regret for having believed Damon's lies too long. I acknowledged their apologies with grace, but kept my distance, cautious not to reopen wounds or invite betrayal. Watching Damon and Lisa's isolation deepen was a slow, cold victory. Their influence waned as respect dissolved into pity or outright dismissal. The family's narrative was no longer theirs to control, and I saw the final fall from grace take root in their defiant glares and faltering steps. The tide had turned, and I stood firmly on the rising shore, no longer threatened by the waves of their manipulation. This was the moment I seized, not with triumphal cries, but with the quiet strength of someone who had survived and emerged stronger. The storm had passed, and the calm that followed was mine to claim. 6 months later, I stood in the living room of the home that bore my name, its walls still bearing echoes of the past, but now filled with a new kind of peace. The house was smaller, quieter, stripped of pomp, but rich in the freedom I had fought for. Matthew was by my side, our bond deepened by shared struggle and mutual respect. The tension that once gripped us had loosened, replaced by a steady rhythm of understanding. Here, in this space, I was finally free to be myself without compromise. I had established clear boundaries. Contact with Damon and Lisa was minimal, measured, and only when respect was maintained. Their diminished social and financial standing was a silent testament to the cost of their betrayal. Yet I harbored no bitterness. Instead, a quiet triumph settled in my bones. I no longer missed the hollow family gatherings or the exhausting performance of approval. I had peace now, and that was worth more than any hollow acceptance. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was mine to shape. As I looked out the window, the evening light soft against the walls, I whispered to myself, "This is enough." No longer invisible, no longer a pawn, I had carved a new life from the wreckage. The path ahead held challenges, but I walked it with my head high and heart steady. The battles waged had forged something unbreakable within me, a strength born not of cruelty, but of survival and clarity. I was free, and in that freedom I found a hope that was quiet but unshakable.